everyone, and welcome to the return of the show. I'm Ben, and on the other side of this audio-only episode today, we have Abraham.
Hello.
And this is unfortunately audio episode only. Unfortunately, my home has become a little bit of a COVID site. So
you got the Rona, buddy. What happened?
It's not me with the Rona. It's my partner. So I'm sleeping on the futon and probably also getting the Rona in like 2 days.
Hate to see it.
Yeah, it's what happens. Everyone stays safe. We're vaccinated. We just didn't get the most up-to-date boosters. But you know who else doesn't have those boosters? The Orcs.
Okay.
See,
I don't
you
really
like
know
what
how
I
to,
did there?
what do you mean?
You like that segue?
I mean, they definitely don't have booster shots in Middle Earth.
No,
if that's what you're implying.
Although I will say our boy Arondir did get a lot of orc blood in his mouth this episode, so like...
Dude, I don't like how the orc blood was black.
Oh yeah, that's just
I
a
hate
canonical thing. Orc blood is always black. That's actually the reason why he knew that it was people.
Oh, because the blood was red,
Yes.
white. That was a good detail.
Yeah,
I didn't think about that.
That is exactly how he figured out what was going on. But anyway, we're here to talk about episode 106, Udun. Udun.
Udun is actually, we looked this up because didn't know exactly what it meant. In the Elvish Sindarin, and this is a quote from an article, Udun means dark pit or hell, but it's also linked to the name for Utamno, which is the first fortress of the Dark Lord Morgoth. So, hence why it's being used here, because they got another one. They got another tower.
They're getting a dark fortress now. They're doing it. I do want to say, like, this episode I thought was absolutely fantastic. We have been really harsh on the last couple episodes of Rings of Power, and it's really nice to turn on the TV and like actually see really, really good television.
I'm not gonna lie. I think everything was good except for everything happening in Numenor. And the reason why it wasn't interesting is just because I was waiting for it to get to the rest of the story. And as soon as they were like, literally from the time when they were on the boat about to see the island, I was like, I feel like Galadriel has like very nice lines. I felt like she was getting a character. And then literally the rest of the episode, I was like, fuck yeah, Galadriel. Fuck yeah, I love this character.
They did her so well this episode.
They really did.
We're going to talk about that more. We have been really hard on the writing for Galadriel up until now. And there's a lot of things that were done right. People who had watched past episodes know what our gripes are, but we're going to be touching up on her a lot. What we're really going to be touching up on this episode is a little pet theory of ours that we have talked about in previous episodes that is kind of getting a lot more support here. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure it just got confirmed.
Yeah.
This week.
I mean, really what this kind of boils down to is why Halbrand wants Adar dead. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that Adar is likely an iteration of Sauron. Now, there's a couple things going on here. We had a batshit crazy theory last week, which is still kind of supported, especially by some choice dialogue this episode. Hey, Ben from Post Production here. Gonna go over that theory real quick. The base idea is that both the Meteor Man and Halbrand are somehow Sauron. That Sauron, either in death or to get away, split himself into his mind in Halbrand and his powers in the Meteor Man. This is mostly supported by the fact that the Meteor Man has had a ton of Sauron imagery, while Halbrand is fulfilling a lot of the lore requirements for Sauron. The Meteor Man is also noted to mark the return of Sauron as the meteor is seen in the sky, which has been apparently prophesized before to certain characters. If you want to know more about that theory, go ahead and watch last week's episode. It will be in the cards above.
I'm not gonna lie, when I said that theory about that like Sauron being split in two, I looking back on that, because I did watch it, I sound like an insane person. I sound very delirious. So I'm not gonna lie, I half expected all of the Halbrand Mystery Man is Sauron debate. I actually thought that would be put to rest this episode because of just how thick they were laying it on, but I guess not.
No, and a lot of what that boils down to, a commenter of ours, Asim Atta, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, put it very well. Adar confesses to splitting Sauron open. Yep. Emphasis on the word splitting here. So for anyone that didn't watch that past episode, there was a wild crackpot theory at the end of the episode that was kind of a joke, but you were like, there were enough supporting elements that were like, yeah, let's go with it.
It is also just because of the nature of the Harfoot story, the fact that the hobbits have not done anything interesting, and we're 6 episodes into this story. I'm like, how is this mystery? How is Meteor Man gonna fit into the larger picture? I just didn't see any other way.
And it makes sense. I will say there were some other comments that were like, "Oh, they're gonna make some shit up, and he's gonna be Gandalf." Like, someone said like Gandalf the Black, and they're gonna be making everything up. I seriously doubt that. Here's the thing: as many problems as I have with this show, they're actually somewhat decent at the overall thematic elements. Like. Yeah. I'm understanding where things are going. Things are kind of leaning into each other and complementing each other, especially after this episode, very well. A lot of the issues that we had with like Galadriel thematically all got done so damn well in this episode that I'm now way more behind her character than I previously was. And a lot of the stuff that's been done with Halbrand is very much in the same boat and is kind of pushing that Sauron point further.
Yeah, it's not that I ever had a problem with Galadriel as a character or her belief systems or anything of that nature. It's just I never felt like the people that were confronting her about her choices were doing so in a compelling way. Like Halbrand in the first few episodes, I really didn't vibe with the way that he was talking to her and how that sort of pointed her in a new direction. It didn't seem to. Whereas the conversation between Galadriel and Adar this episode was probably one of the most compelling scenes that she's been in.
Oh, easily.
And I also love the philosophy of and the motivation behind Adar, because we're getting into a lot more of the, the mindset of the people who hate the orcs, where they belong in Middle-earth as a whole, and also just, are orcs a damnation, as Galadriel puts it, or do they have a place that they can actually belong to, like Adar is suggesting?
And so this goes into something that I really love about Tolkien's original works, and I feel like when a lot of people critique this show, they'll say that it doesn't feel Tolkien. It does feel very Tolkien. It just doesn't feel Peter Jackson, which is the most famous movie interpretation of this. And Peter Jackson, great films. I don't think that we would have gotten the same sort of dichotomy conversation that's happening here, because this is something that does exist within the source material. You do have conversations about whether or not orcs are inherently bad. And even Tolkien himself was the kind of person who, and is directly quoted as saying that he wanted no races that were seen as purely evil. And orcs are a reflection of that in the fact that he wanted them to exist as a corruption. He wanted them to exist as a result of something horrible that was done to them and sort of create them like this larger boogeyman. However, what the show is doing very brilliantly and kind of keeping in pace with the idea of there are no evil races is bringing up orcs are going to look for a place to stay and they're going to look for a way to survive. And what we're seeing here isn't the rise of Sauron, it's them just wanting to find a place to live, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, it literally hurts them to go outside. Like their skin boils in the sun. And you also have to think about this, because I asked you this question just before taping the episode, and it's how much time has passed between the start of the war with Mogarth and the current day.
Oh, the start of the war. I thought you meant the end of the war. Oh,
even the end of the war. Sure, when Mogarth
the end of the war, I think over 1,000 years. Like
Okay.
1,080 to 1,800, I believe, is the time frame that we're looking at.
Perfect. Okay. A race of people that has not loyally served their ex-leader that is already dead for 1,000 years. Sauron is also dead by this point, at least it's believed, or he is like off the map. So the orcs are just kind of flying solo. They don't really, I mean, like, yes, they're taking lives, but it's all in the pursuit of this goal that they have, which is to create a new haven for them. And on the one hand, you know, we were even saying this, it sucks that they're killing people. It sucks that they are, you know, going into such brutality to get what they want. But we also have to consider the opposition that is faced, you know, that they're faced with. Their kind has like been eradicated from the face of the earth just for following Mogarth, which is something that humans have also done, and yet they're not facing any of the same repercussions. The only reason why the elves truly are fighting the only reason why the elves are truly fighting the orcs is because they believe them to be a corruption of what they are. And that whole idea is perfectly cemented in Galadriel's confrontation with her own, you know, with her own belief systems and like how that's confronted. You know, we don't want to believe that we are as evil as the people that we're confronting, which is just fuel for the fire, for the war, for the character. And I'm glad it was finally put into words.
Yeah.
It was really great.
So there were so many memes about like everyone doing their best to make Galadriel as dislikable of a character in the show. But now I can confidently say that's the whole fucking point of the character.
Yeah.
We're watching a character go from someone who has lost the majority of their family throughout the war. By the end of the Third Age, she will be the last elf who has ever seen the trees of her homeland.
Yeah.
Like, this is a character that's going to she's going to carry so much weight, and having her be this full of hate for the people that destroyed her home, it makes total sense. And having it turn into a character flaw that we can now see is both exploitable and is something that she knows is a problem about herself, and maybe is something that she's going to try to fix, is really good for the character. We're seeing all the elements of a developed character now, where beforehand, and I think you're right, the Numenor side plot slowed things down way too much.
Yeah, because she's not facing any orcs. She's not facing her demons. She's just put in timeout for 4 episodes.
Yep. Okay. No, that's very eloquently put.
I guarantee you, if episode 1 started with even a small skirmish between her and orcs that ultimately didn't result in the finding of Sauron, I think that would have done wonders, and maybe reducing the Normanna subplot to like maybe 2 episodes.
I mean, the pacing of the show obviously has not been great. That is my number one gripe here. But I do think you're right. Having us see a little bit more of this concrete side, and if we understood that a lot of her anger and hatred was not just pointed at the idea of Sauron, but like even the orcs themselves, because this is the first time we've seen Galadriel with orcs. Beforehand, it was a troll, and admittedly, trolls are very much a different thing and do not have the intelligence to have a conversation. You cannot have a character-on-character moment with a troll unless you make the troll very intelligent.
Yeah.
You're just not going to get it.
Yeah, we needed to see her cruelty like really come to light, and that is really done well when she just denies the humanity that the Uruk and Adar have, which was very chilling, by the way. It was a very chilling scene.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was like, the entire time I was watching, like, they're still not trying to have us like her, right? And then the second Adar called her out, I was like, yes, okay. And then it's bothering her. Excellent. We're doing things with the character now. I love this.
She brought the knife to his throat. Halbrand walked in, and then she still slit it, but just didn't cut too deep. That was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, they know what they're doing with this character now.
And honestly, this is kind of what brings us back to Halbrand, because Halbrand, again, the first time that they interact, Halbrand wants to murder Adar.
No conversation, just smoke on sight.
No, there's a little bit of conversation. He wants recognition from Adar as to who he is.
Oh no, I know. I mean like more so just the fact that he tripped his horse.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, but this is totally an aside. I loved from a filmmaking standpoint that they were like, nope, we're going to show you that the horse is
okay. Yep.
Like, they didn't need to show us that. It could have just been Game of Thrones style. They tripped the horse and it broke its leg. It's done.
No, they absolutely needed to show that because I am tired of the horse trauma. There's too much horse trauma in shows.
You know what? Fair enough. But that's kind of like when we're talking about Halbrand, though, like we get into this moment and she pulls him back from murdering Adar because obviously she needs information. Mm-hmm. And he pulls her away from murdering Adar, not because of information at this moment, but because killing him would not go well for Galadriel in the long term. That would play into her consciousness. Well,
it would also not do well for him because think about it, like, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but like the whole thing of like the orcs and the relationship that the orcs have with Sauron, that's something that we have to talk about later on in the episode. But I just want to point that out, that it could also benefit him.
That is fair. He could have extra moments. He could have ulterior motives with that. But he certainly plays it to Galadriel as if it's the latter. And they have their, let's just say, very intimate moment sitting on a log together, having a conversation as to what's just passed, and then seemingly wanting to spend more time in battle together with each other forever, which is very romance coded.
It is, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, so our running theory right now with him being Sauron kind of plays into the level of manipulation that he's been able to pull off through the previous subplot. And the sort of weirdness of his arrival and the fact that he just comes off of a boat. We know nothing about him. We get no supporting flashbacks to any of his stories, just weird moments. The one time that they do flashback, it's about a dude asking about Sauron, which is not really a flashback. Yeah. It's just they were juxtaposing two scenes.
Additionally, when Halbrand has the spear to Adar's throat, Adar is the one who's filling in the gaps in Halbrand's story, not Halbrand ever revealing why he wants to kill Adar. And in the scene where Galadriel almost slits his throat, there's a moment where Halbrand almost leaves. Adar says, "Who are you?" And Halbrand's back is to the camera. We do not see his face, no reaction. He just pauses for a moment and keeps going.
And let's take a look at this supporting our theory here. Halbrand, let's say Halbrand is Sauron. Let's say that Adar did something to kill Sauron that ended up splitting him into two pieces. And we're talking about one with his mind, which in this case would definitely be Halbrand, and then one with his powers, which we believe to be the Meteor Man at this point. Right. So that's the running theory. We don't see Halbrand doing any sort of magic stuff, but clearly he's meeting all the criteria. He's been schmoozing with the Númenóreans. He's been ultimately a convincing path in order to leading to this war and bringing them down the path that they currently are. And Galadriel calls him out for being like, hey, arguably, you've been the one manipulating me because everything I have done has raised your stature. And now he's back in the Southlands. the really important thing here is that he's supposed to be king of the Southlands. He shows up with that little medallion, sort of that symbol that is supposed to signify that. And this is going into the king that was promised. So obviously, after Adar's plan happens and Mount Doom erupts due to water irrigation of all things, there's no Southlands.
Yeah, goodbye Southlands.
But if he's Sauron, he's still going to be king of those Southlands, which, from a narrative standpoint, all of these things point to him still being Sauron.
They're dangling the dramatic irony of the situation, and it just keeps, like, the pendulum of that dramatic irony just keeps swinging and swinging and swirling, and with everything that's happened now, it's like, oh, it's like literally the writers of the show are going, haha, do you get it? Because he's Sauron.
Do you get what's happening?
Do you get what's happening? You see what we're doing? He's the king. There's no more Southlands, but hey, he's still king of it.
Still gonna be king. Honestly, I think that the main reason why he wanted to kill Adar, well, there's two reasons. First of all, the pure anger that he probably had is because this probably still set Sauron back.
Oh, yeah.
Being split into two, because we know he's a Malar. He's the same thing as Gandalf. He cannot be killed by mortal means.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like, this is very much the case. Every time Sauron has been killed, there has been some way that he's been able to come back. So having him do it in a very Malar fashion and coming back as essentially one version as a wizard and then potentially his mind coming back as a mortal, that's very in line with the very whimsical soft magic system that we have. And there is precedent for it, which is really important.
Is there?
Yes, with
About
Gandalf.
being split in two?
Not being split in two, but coming,
about coming back. Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
he came back as just his soul tethered to a tower. Like,
oh, really? Okay, so
yeah.
literally anything's possible.
Yeah, literally anything's possible. The Malar are not mortal in the same way as any of us. The reason why destroying the One Ring is really important is because it's probably one of the only ways that you can kill a Malar, because what he did... Actually, no! That's it! That is what makes the most sense. No, there is precedent. Holy shit! The One Ring in The Lord of the Rings is part of Sauron. He split himself into two. He put his power into the ring.
Oh, yeah. So it's totally possible that he could put his power into a person.
Yes.
Okay.
Fuck.
Yeah, so there's literally
there's absolutely precedent for that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess also another thing is, like, this kind of just... Okay, because, like, we're set in the theory, right? Like, that's no issue. It's obvious that the writers are doing, at the very least, it is clear that the writers are setting up that Halbrand is Sauron. Maybe not the Meteor Man, that's still a shot in the dark, but it's definitely the case of Halbrand.
Yes.
This only raises more questions about the relationship between Adar, Sauron, and the Orcs. Because Adar in the scene with Galadriel, he's obviously not lying when he says that he killed Sauron, because in a scene 2 episodes ago when he was confronted with humans who mistook him for Sauron, he reacted negatively. It's clear that he is not fond of Sauron.
Yes.
So he's obviously not lying about that. He also states in the scene with Galadriel that the reason that he killed him was because he was tired of offering up the orcs, whom he called his children, as basically sacrifices for his war. That calls into question the nature of Sauron's relationship with the orcs, you know, because if Adar is like their like father, and, you know, Galadriel even says like they're not people, they're slaves. Adar doesn't seem to think so. At least he doesn't treat them that way. He seems to treat them well.
Yeah.
That just kind of brings it up into question. Are the orcs as vulnerable to manipulation and to the treachery as the humans, you know, in the same way? Because the humans were basically put into that same position where many of them followed just because, you know, hey, strong guy is now ruling this area. I guess I got to follow him. So could the orcs also be doing the same thing now?
Yes.
If Sauron comes back.
So let's let's talk a little bit about orcs and representations of Middle Earth and all these. Just token writing and what's been surrounding this. The main issue with orcs is that they are cannibalistic in nature. They have to eat not deer, not other things. They have to eat people. They have to eat other orcs. They're in a very difficult place in order for what can support them. And when Morgoth created the orcs, he did it to spite the elves and the other Valar and Malar that existed. That is true, but he also did it to raise an army for himself. And like this is getting way too deep for the Lord of the Rings, but I guess now because the show is presenting us with these themes, we can take a look at this. If you present people with very limited options, you now suddenly have an entire population of elves that are cannibals of sorts. That's just what they are. Their very existence is calling into question the nature of their kind. They are a danger to others around them, and only one person is willing to help them and give them a place to thrive. They're going to go with that one person.
Right.
I mean, it's a form of manipulation as much as coercion is a form of manipulation. But it's also like when it's generationally set in, because orcs, some of them at least, especially the Uruk, which, by the way, I will say this is somewhat of I did look into it. The Uruk is a term that is it has not always been used this way within Tolkien. It has actually been used to refer to the Uruk-hai, which are only in the Third Age. But for the purposes of this show, exploring the idea of the first orcs and seeing Adar as a proto-orc, we can kind of go with it. They're going to be stuck in this situation, and generationally speaking, like if you have that many people that is the only thing that they're going to do, of course they're going to follow Sauron or another Dark Lord that takes up his mantle after the fact, because they don't really have much else to go with. The other things, though, is that there are examples of orcs that are not loyal to Sauron or any of the Dark Lords. And those are the goblins that live in the mountains. So we haven't seen any of them in this. We haven't seen any of them within the story, but the goblins are also a type of orc. They come from the same place. They're a little bit smaller, but they all live within the mountains. They're not loyal to a Dark Lord or a Dark Army. They are just loyal to themselves and their tribes.
Right.
So they're equally as susceptible to politics, but they're going to naturally side with people who have historically sided with them in the past.
Yeah. I guess the questions now that I have in terms of the last 2 episodes, because only got 2 more left.
Yes.
How will the volcano eruption impact Adar's influence in the orcs, as well as the attitudes of the neighboring kingdoms and the Elven kingdom in relationship to what is now going to be Mount Doom?
Both Mount Doom and Mordor. So
yeah, because I'm thinking like if this is now ground zero for a habitable place for orcs, the elves are going to want to get involved in that, right?
Yes. So, if they have proof that is the case, which
I mean
is going to be because keep in mind, everyone else in the story right now does not believe orcs exist anymore.
True, but because Galadriel was the only one who believed, but now we have another elf who's coming into the fray.
Yes.
Who now offers firsthand accounts along with a bunch of humans, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
So what happens now if this is where the story goes from here on out for the last 2 episodes?
Okay.
Because I'm thinking now, this place goes up. There's nothing that they can do to stop it. They have to evacuate and leave. Halbrand, the elves, and some of the humans go to where the elves are currently residing, the king of the elves, and they finally convince them, hey, we got to really take it seriously so that we can win the war, take it over. And Halbrand is the leading force for that. However, Halbrand doesn't really want to stop the orcs. What he wants to do is take them over. Perhaps this is how the rings get forged, because he offers them a way to get power, and in so doing, allows him to yeet himself into the new kingdom, because Adar's probably still going to be around.
Yeah.
It could all be like a grand plan where he's like, I'm going to get this guy who, who's in control of the orcs. I'm going to take his seat, and now I will rule.
I think grand plan, we know that Sauron, who we now have a very strong theory, all but confirmed right now that it is Halbrand.
Yep.
There's a couple things going on here. If we're talking about it being 100% lore accurate as far as as close to what it needs to be, then he would have to be an elf at the time that he convinces them to make the rings, because that is the original story that's going off here. That being said, I think your pattern is correct. I do think that they will leave. The question is will Halbrand fake his own death and then come back as this elf that is going to convince them to do forging? And then the question is, like, that plot line that might grow actually really well from Galadriel having interacted with Halbrand and knowing how Halbrand works and seeing similarities between this other elf and Halbrand. That's a way that story would go. I do think, however, that is season 2. I think that what we're going to see is Halbrand may die at some point or fake a death. And it's going to be a moment where us as the audience are convinced that he's dead, and Galadriel's convinced that he's dead. And then probably end of the season, we will get a moment of him changing shape into a new elf. And that's going to be the whole Sauron moment. Yes, he is Sauron. And now we will be in on the fact that that is Sauron now going and politically changing everything as far as Numenor and as far as the elves are concerned with the rings. All of these are options. The other elements here, though, as far as like this season is concerned, I think that we're going to see a lot less of the Southlands. I think that we're going to see a lot more focus on the other factions. I do think that maybe end of the season, Galadriel gets home. I do not know how they're going to do that, because they made it pretty obvious that she was just letting the hot ash and smoke billow into her, which maybe they're following fantasy logic and like, oh, that doesn't hurt her too much. But like,
oh yeah, they're definitely they're absolutely following fantasy logic. There's no way that she's
then great, because otherwise she's horrifically burned and smoke damaged from that.
Yeah.
We will see what happens on that. They will evacuate. The real question is going to be how it plays into the strange white people that are looking for the Meteor Man. The Meteor Man himself, how that's going to play into this. And then the
mithril
elves.
and the dwarves
yeah, and I'm still relatively suspect of a couple things that are going on with the mithril. I do think that Adar brought up something about many lies being told, and specifically, I didn't put this in the show notes, but when he talked about the lies that were being told by the elves, he mentioned that they went as deep as the roots in the mountains. Which is,
so it could even be the origin of the mithril.
The origin of the mithril thing might be fake. Yeah. Like,
I mean, yeah, it was the king of the elves who said it. And I mean, if we're made to believe that the king of the elves is not to be trusted, yeah, that could be BS. Especially
because the king of the elves has that same goddamn neck piece as Adar. It's such a minute detail, but we do know that there's a connection there. They didn't just pick those two costumes and color one of them black.
They also look similar.
They do.
They they could be related.
Really what it comes down to is what these next episodes look like, if there's any political subterfuge that we're going to have to deal with, if they're going to dig deeper for mithril and then uncover something bad, or if all their attention is going to be suddenly turned to the south because a giant fucking volcano blew up and they can see the smoke from up on high.
I mean, hey, we gotta wait a week to find out.
We do. So on that, I do think that there is one other question though. So the Southlands are done. All the people from Numenor are out. There is a question of who's going to be left to be in charge of this company and of the South in general. The stable hand Isildur is supposed to be destined for great things. He is supposed to become the king of the men in the South. Not the same thing as the Southlands, though, because the Southlands are Mordor. He's going to be that area to the east on the other side of the mountains that will eventually house Gondor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we might end up looking at with them is we might look at the whole of that party being wiped out over the next couple episodes. I think that they will try to escape, try to evacuate, but either the volcano has fucked them over so severely, or other orcs are going to start coming out of the woodwork now that the sky is clouded over.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, could this be how the fall of Numenor, as they put it?
Having their queen go down off seas?
And then they're just left without a ruler, and then they perish in the coming months?
I feel like that's too simple. I do think that it will be a contributing factor if she dies. And the idea is that Sauron is supposed to poison the minds of the men in Numenor. Currently, the queen's gone. If the queen's taken out of the picture, and then someone else swoops in to pick up that power vacuum.
Perhaps the gentleman with the beard who was not too fond of elves?
Perhaps. He's not on that boat. He didn't go with the company.
You're right. He stayed behind.
So I think on that one now, we're going to finish up this episode with a fun Tolkien fact. So I alluded to this last episode. So,
sure.
Question for you.
Okay.
Did you know that Sauron was once a cat?
So tune in next week where we talk about...
Wait, I'm not done. No. I'm not done.
No, I know.
So...
I didn't know that, no.
So this is an interesting tidbit. He was not literally once a cat. However, this is a story that takes place in Middle-earth, or at least within the greater world that Middle-earth is in. There was a cat named Tevildo, the prince of all cats, and he was a villain in a previous short story by Tolkien. And the first drafts of Sauron, for what this character was supposed to be for the original Lord of the Rings, his name was Telvido. And he was also originally labeled as the Lord of Cats and was Morgoth's first general. So through time, he eventually changed it. It was this cat. Then he was like, I don't know if I like that, so I'm going to make him this guy named Thu, who is supposed to be a necromancer instead of a cat, and then just change Thu into Sauron. But Thu, the necromancer, is actually an embodiment of Sauron that is seen previously.
So by the transitive property of Easter eggs, Sauron was a cat.
Exactly.
All right.
And that is the Tolkien fun fact for this week. So tune in next time, I guess, and we'll have another fun fact, and we're going to be seeing exactly what happens next episode. And hey, it's the return of the show.
Meow.